Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Young Lawyer Podcast. For all those newbies listening in, this podcast discusses topics such as studying law, mental states, mindsets, dealing with external factors, and unexpected circumstances. Along the way, having guest speakers such as senior associates, graduate lawyers, and students. Now let's get into it.
Alrighty, well, welcome to the Young Lawyer Podcast. It's great to finally have you on. If you can just start by introducing yourself for the listeners and how you began your legal journey.
Yeah, thanks, Damon. Hi, listeners. My name's Zac Smithers, and I'm a lawyer with Brennan and Goulet Lawyers in Maroochydore. So we're practically neighbours, Damon. My legal journey, it's sort of been a process of rolling with the punches. There wasn't really one particular day where it all started. I know in high school I was more so interested in sports. I hadn't really looked too far in the future and considered what career I might want to pursue post completing high school. At that time, or around that time, my legal studies teacher sort of sparked an interest in me in the law and sort of made note that I was getting the knack of legal studies and the law in general. So I think in year 12, that's when my mum said, "Hey mate, maybe you should start considering some studies and what you might want to do at university because sport might not always be there for you." So I listed off my QCAT preferences, and I put down law at the University of the Sunshine Coast, and sure enough, I ended up studying law at the University of the Sunshine Coast. And even then, I remember going home from my first lecture at university and saying to Mum, "Oh, I don't know about this law business. I don't think I'm cracked out for it." A lot of the students, I recall, before the lecture kicked off, were pretty passionate, had a fair idea of what they wanted to do, whereas I was quite naive to the whole legal profession and what was involved. I had a rough understanding, but certainly didn't have something set in stone.
And you feel probably at that age it's really hard to find yourself in what you are passionate about because, you spent your whole life at school and other than sport or anything else like that, you really haven't tasted or tried anything else to actually expand what you're interested in.
That's it. Absolutely. I think I had a bit of an interest in physiotherapy. So in year 10, we did a bit of work experience as part of the school program, and I worked with a chiropractor. But after that, I soon sort of realised that's probably not where I want to go, and it wasn't as interesting as I thought it would be. So yeah, I agree, Damon. There's even now you'll have moments where you second guess yourself or question whether you're at the right stage of life and where to go.
I absolutely agree, and I was in a similar position. I actually went down to Gold Coast Uni to do exercise science and like pre-physio. I did, I think, one semester, and there was biology, chemistry, physics, and I'm like, yeah, no, this is definitely not for me. And then I came back and pretty much fell into a law job, and pretty much loved it ever since, really. So, how did you find your transition through uni to actually becoming a lawyer now?
Well, I was pretty fortunate, mate. I've landed on my feet in many respects. And I say that because I studied through uni, and in my penultimate year, as you may know, a lot of students apply for clerkships, generally with the bigger firms. I know from the University of Sunshine Coast, a lot of students applied for clerkships with Brisbane firms, and I must have been walking around campus catching flies at that time because I missed the memo to apply for clerkships. Fortunately, one of my professors, Jay Sanderson, he recommended me for a position with a firm on the coast, My Legal, which at the time was being run by Matthew Yates alone. Matthew took me on and he gave me a lot of mentoring. He gave me my first chance in the legal profession, for which I'm very grateful. And so from there, I worked part-time whilst also studying. And Matthew was really supportive and not only gave me advice as a law student and soon to enter the legal profession, but also just more generally life advice, which helped me better understand where I wanted to go with the legal profession. I think that's when I started hitting my straps and realizing, hey, this is something I'm really interested in. This is something I have a passion for. I am cracked out for it. And then what happened was later in my penultimate year, there was actually a clerkship application for a large PI firm, a national PI firm, and I just sent off an application because something that I was very mindful of early in my career is to trial some different areas of law, to dip my toes in the water, because like you mentioned before, I didn't really want to be pigeonholed in something and have some regrets. So maybe, I'm in personal injury law right now. I'm very passionate about it. I enjoy this line of work, but I was mindful that if I, say for example, I worked in personal injury law for 10 years and that was the only area of law I ever tried, maybe I'd look back 10 years later and think, oh, now I've dabbled in a little bit of wills and estates. What was I thinking? Why didn't I get into this earlier? And it's probably a bit of a hard process to come back and start at the start in a different area of law, giving up your sort of 10 years of specialising in one practice. So I applied for the personal injury role with the PI firm. I was off on a camping trip with some mates down in Yamba, northern New South Wales, and I got a call saying, hey, we'd love to have an interview with you. Can you come up to Brisbane? So that's not really possible right now because I didn't drive down here and I'm with my friends camping, but can we do a Skype interview? And sure enough, we arranged a Skype interview. The visual wasn't working, the video wasn't working, I should say. So it didn't really go to plan, but in the end it worked out and I got that job, and that's where I started in PI. And I haven't looked back since. So I'm very fortunate right now. I'm working with Brennan and Gulo lawyers, like I said, working alongside Ashley Gulo, who's taken a lot of time already, even though I'm early in the piece with them, and showed me the ropes, taught me a different way of looking at client care. And in my opinion, his client care is unparalleled. So I'm hitting my straps in personal injury law right now. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. You got to trial and error to find out what you're actually passionate for, and it's so good to see that you're actually, passionate for PI law. I guess what is it about the personal injury law that actually attracts you to it and wants you to stay in it?
Yeah, great question. Well, when I was working with My Legal, we were doing a little bit of employment and commercial law, and don't get me wrong, I was quite enjoying the employment side of things, but I don't think that's where my passion lies. And the reason I say that is because now that I'm practicing in personal injury law, this client interaction, the incidents and the circumstances giving rise to my clients' injuries is something that really hits home with me, and something that I can understand, something that motivates me to do my absolute best at work for my clients and work in their best interests. Something I say to my clients as well is, in that initial meeting, is I like to take a really open and honest approach with them, because they're ultimately the people that are in need. So, and there's this power imbalance that's quite obvious, at least to me, when I'm sitting in the room with a client and their partner or a support person. They're telling me their story, telling me quite personal details. They're opening up to me, but they don't really have any idea about the law, and hence why they're there with me, and what redress or what rights or interests they might have. So I say to them, look, my mum's a teacher, my dad's a tradesman. If they were to sit in this office today with an injury, they wouldn't have a clue what to do. So if I can just put all the cards out on the table for them, be completely open and honest, and that way they can make an informed decision. And then ultimately, if they decide to pursue a personal injury claim and we can assist them, then there's that. At the end of the claim, there's potentially some compensation that can help them get back to where they would have been but for the incident, and that really motivates me. As cliche as it sounds, that's a really rewarding feeling for me. Something I enjoy doing.
Yeah, and that's something I've noticed is pretty common amongst personal injury lawyers. Their client care is their main priority, and they really love all the intricacies of personal injury law and everything that it entails. which I find fascinating because I personally haven't touched on it, and I don't think I'd really want to after dealing with family matters and being involved closely with clients and all that sort of stuff. I'm not a big fan in that way. I feel like I'd get too involved probably. So like I'm happy doing my commercial and civil litigation and whatnot. So I guess when you started as a young lawyer, what kind of setbacks did you face, and I guess how did you overcome them?
Yeah, well, I suppose something I alluded to before is one of the setbacks is sort of trusting the process. You can question yourself at times, or second guess where you're going with either your studies, with your job, what area of law you're in. So something I would pass on to law students and lawyers earlier on in their career, and no doubt it applies to senior lawyers as well, is just persisting in the face of uncertainty. So, for example, in that penultimate year, it seemed like the thing to do was apply for these clerkships, and I sort of missed the boat there, but I've landed on my feet, and I wouldn't rather be anywhere else than where I am right now. That's one particular example. I know I've been fortunate enough to work for some different employers, and those gaps between finishing up with one employer and starting with another employer, or not knowing where you're going to go with your next job, that's certainly uncertain times if you're going to move. So I've grew up in Redcliffe, moved to the Sunshine Coast, worked in Bundaberg for a period, and I've recently moved back to the Sunshine Coast. So trusting the process, as cliche as that sounds as well, just persist, try and I know it's easier said than done, but try and remain calm and not stress too much about things that are outside of your control. That's absolutely one thing. One of the, I suppose, if you want to phrase it, a setback that I've faced.
Yeah, and that's such great advice. And I think a lot of us, especially as young lawyers, we make mistakes and we go, "Oh, are we cut out for this?" Like, we keep making mistakes, we keep making mistakes. And I think a lot of people don't realize is that it's not because we're dumb or anything. It's more the fact we're inexperienced. Like, we'll go into another area of law and think, "Oh, we've studied at uni, we should know this." But in actual fact, uni just prepares you for, I guess, everything that can go right. It doesn't really prepare you for everything that can go wrong.
Yeah, that's right, Damon. And I think you mentioned it on some previous podcasts, and that's great advice. Don't be put out by getting it wrong. I think one of your guests used that as motivation for her to get better at her job or get better at uni, and I think that's great.
And I guess, what emphasis would you place on, I guess, having a good mentor or a good supporting crew wherever you're working?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I was very fortunate to meet some of the people that I did and I have during my career to date. I mentioned Jay Sanderson before. He gave me some great advice. I remember I was speaking with him about an assignment. Actually, I think it was my thesis that I was chatting with him about, and he always had time to not only chat about that, but check in with me, checking how life outside of law school was going. And one of the things he passed on to me was this sort of theory of being a good person, the good person factor. And not to misquote him, but what I took away from it was you can't necessarily put this good person factor on your CV. It's not something that's sort of tangible in writing. You don't have a certificate for it, but he said that's going to open up doors. That's what's going to take you places, because if you're not only a good person in life but also in the legal profession, it's a small world, as you know, particularly on the Sunshine Coast. It's a small profession, so if you do right, and I suppose you could ask what's a good person, but I think common sense gives us a rough scope of what being a good person involves. That will ultimately take you far, and to date it has. At the time, I thought, well, that's great, Jay, but I plan to be a good person. How's this going to be any different to what I intend to do? But now I look back at it with the benefit of hindsight, and the job I have right now, that was through a connection reaching out to me, simply because I was, in her opinion, a culture fit for Brennan and Gullo lawyers. And then, sure enough, it turns out that I was the right fit for Brendan and Gullo, and they were the right fit for me. So that good person factor certainly rings true with me now.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting advice. And just on the topic of, I guess, networking, how crucial is it to network nowadays, even, LinkedIn or go to coffee with people, to even just get your name out there, really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea, and like I said to you, this is a great initiative because you get to bounce ideas back and forth with anyone from a law student through to a senior associate, and get to see their views on the legal profession in life, and I think that's very valuable. In terms of networking, I think that is also valuable. I'm not one for artificial networking, and putting on a bit of a show. I'll always be who I am, and like I said before with Brennan and Gullo lawyers, it was more about making sure that we're both the right fit. So I think catching up with you like I did the other week and just going for coffee, having a general chit chat, getting to know each other properly, I think that's very valuable. That's how I like to network. Some may not, and that's fine. So networking's great, putting yourself out there. You've mentioned quite a few times on the podcast as well that we're willing to help. I know I am, and a lot of the other guests mentioned as well. If anyone reaches out and wants some tips, tricks, advice, just catch up for a chit chat, more than willing to help. So I think that's really good.
And just, well, for any listeners, how can they get in contact with you?
Absolutely, they can get in contact with me on LinkedIn, Zac Smithers. They can email me, zsmithers@bglaw.com.au. And we can arrange a time to chat, or we can speak over the phone, whatever suits them.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then just moving on to the next topic, I guess, how do you deal with the day-to-day struggles that come with being a lawyer, or the stresses, I should say?
Yeah, great question, Damien. Another thing that I quickly realised during university, and now that I'm in the legal profession, is there's no pause button on life. Life continues whilst you're working away. No doubt we'll all face and have faced obstacles outside of just work or inside of work, and at the same time, you've got work. You're packed with work. And then you've got life going on outside. So I think I've got some close mates, some close family, a really, really friendly, welcoming, and supportive workplace that I work at right now that I can lean on. So, if, for example, not that I've faced this yet, but if, for example, I was really struggling to maintain my workload, or my capacity was outside of what I feel I'm capable of at a particular time, I'm sure I could lean on Ash and just mention to him, "Hey, can we lean off for this period, and I'll pick up again." And then seeking support outside of that. So speaking of friends and family, you might have had a busy day at work, just touching base with them, mentioning what's stressing you or what you might be struggling with. And obviously there's even professional support if you feel that's something that you need help with.
Oh, and I absolutely agree. Communication is the biggest thing, and often when we're stressed, the last thing we'd want to do is actually talk to people. But people underestimate how much it actually helps just even getting it off your chest. Not everyone's going to be able to help. Like, no one can really help with the situation with the workload, but just getting it off your chest and clearing your head, I guess, is a good start. And I guess, what sort of stuff do you do outside of work? Like, any passions? Like, I know you mentioned when we caught up for coffee that you were into football and boxing and all that sort of stuff. And I guess, how does that reflect back to, dealing with the stresses?
Yeah. Well, there's many benefits, but two benefits I'm finding in particular is with sport for me. Like you mentioned, I do CrossFit at 6 p.m. most nights, or some sort of boxing, or I intend to rejoin a touch footy team while I'm down on the Sunshine Coast. So that makes sure that at the end of the day, I'm not working up until some silly hour of the night. I get out at 5:30. I go to whatever my sport or whatever I'm booked in for that night. So firstly, that keeps my hours maintainable, and I think it helps make sure that I won't burn out. But secondly, when I'm there, I'm thinking about punching the boxing bag, or I'm thinking about lifting the weight, and I'm not thinking about work. The stresses that I might have been dealing with during the day are not in my mind. So that's a really good outlet for me. But for other people, it might be music, it might be art, it might be reading a book, it might be walking along the beach with your partner. I think it's that. It's that phrase that we all talk about, work-life balance, but it really is important, and I think it'll help with your longevity in the profession and in studies.
Oh, I completely agree once again. And I feel like, yeah, everyone is different in how they deal with their stresses. I know for me, I've got gym. I do enjoy a bit of meditation and reading books from time to time. Um, but I know a lot of people, meditation's not for them, and that's fine. Like, everyone's got their own vices, their own outlets to deal with things. And I guess you don't really know what works for you. And we said earlier, without trial and error, like, no one really knows that whether it's going to work or not.
Yeah, and I think it probably even ties back in a bit with what my mum mentioned to me in high school is you can still have sport as a hobby, or if it's art, or if it's reading books, or if it's gaming, you can still have that and study and work in a profession if that's what you choose to do. Just because I studied law or chose to study law doesn't necessarily mean I have to completely dismiss any sport or other interests or hobbies or passions I have.
Yeah, exactly. And then just, well, because we're coming to the end, if you weren't a lawyer, what do you reckon you'd be doing?
Oh, geez, that's a tricky one. Or like I mentioned, I did have a little bit of an interest in physiotherapy. I also spoke with a sports agent at one stage because I was considering, given how versatile a law degree is, leveraging that and working in a bit of a sports agent capacity. I know for certain I wouldn't be a tradesman. I spent school holidays with Dad, and like I said, he was a tradesman, and I quickly realised that working out in the sun and not sitting down in an office chair under the aircon isn't so favourable. Plus, I'd probably still be looking for that left-hand screwdriver that my boss asked me to look for on day one. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Damon.
Yeah, I've been there. Well, before I started here, I was actually doing a labouring job for 2 years because where I'm from, there's very minimal employment opportunities for lawyers and law clerks and whatnot. So yeah, I was working in a warehouse, screwing bolts, and yeah, look at me now.
Yeah, and hey, mate, that background, you'll probably use that if you haven't already. Whether you're dealing with a client that's worked in a warehouse before, whether you're doing some sort of contract that has some sort of warehouse background, no doubt that'll come into play. I think each individual, each lawyer's background can be utilised as well in their professional capacity.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's really just highlighted to me, like, since starting here, how much I actually enjoy turning up to work. Like, when I first started, just because it was such a big transition, I actually just enjoyed sitting here in the office. Everyone's probably gone and I'm not really working. I'm just enjoying being in the atmosphere because I've worked in that shed for so long. And, I turn up to work at 5 o'clock each morning and didn't really enjoy it. And then you leave, or you do your 10, 12-hour days, and then you leave. And then you come here, and I'm just sitting here, and just like after hours, I'm like, it's finally kicked in. Like, as you said, trust the process, and it's finally just kind of paid off.
Mate, absolutely, and that's so awesome to hear. I can just see from your smile that by trusting the process, you've ended where you're at right now, and you're obviously loving it and very passionate about it. So that's really great to hear.
Thanks. And final question for you. I guess you've doled out a lot of advice throughout this episode. In summary, what would your main advice be to someone who wants to start a legal journey or is a bit unsure whether they want to continue or not?
Yeah. Okay. Well, like I mentioned, I think just being generally a good person will help you and go a long way, even though you're not going to put it on your CV. The second thing is, yeah, trusting that process. Just if times are uncertain or your thoughts are uncertain, just persist with it, and there might be that light at the end of the tunnel, and you'll come out and you'll look back at it. At least for me and you, by the sounds, that was the case. And thirdly, if you are in your studies, and credit to you and congrats on getting this far, and you're looking to step foot in the legal profession. I know a lot of other guests have mentioned as well getting that work experience, and from an employer's point of view, I no doubt that is very important. I know at my previous firm, I helped interview people and that recruiting process, and that's something that we certainly look at. But secondly, for yourself as well, it'll give you a good idea of whether the legal profession is for you. If so, what area of law you might be particularly passionate about. So they're the three things. I won't harp on too much about that because I know other guests have really touched on that and gave some great advice in that regard.
And just touching on, I guess, the whole interview process, what can someone do to kind of stand out from, the hundreds of pieces of paper that law firms get every other week?
Yeah, well, you could probably bypass the stack of resumes if you knew someone at that firm, or if someone at that firm reached out to you simply because you've been a good person or you're the culture fit for them. The other thing you can do, and again, this has been mentioned by a number of guests, so I won't harp on about it too much, but research that firm. Firstly, make sure that that's the right firm for you, that their areas of law is something that you're interested in, and by researching that, you'll no doubt show the interviewer or the employer that you're a go-getter, that you are interested in their firm, that you're taking the job seriously, or at least the application process seriously. And I think that will definitely help increase your prospects.
Yeah, and once again, that's such great advice as you provided throughout this episode. Thanks again for jumping on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Damon. And like I said to you before we started this podcast, it's a great initiative from you, mate. Keep kicking goals.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to the Young Lawyer Podcast. If you found this content useful or enjoyable, make sure you share it with your family, friends, or colleagues. Let's grow the Young Lawyer community. If I can ask you a huge favour, can you please leave a review or a comment on iTunes and subscribe to the YouTube channel, so that way we can grow the community even further. Until next time, guys.